Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Let me show you some super secret keyboard shortcuts. I'm not talking about the keyboard shortcuts you find in the menu bar. I'm not talking about the custom ones you create in System Preferences. I'm talking about something different. You're going to want to see this. MacMost is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MacMost.com/Patreon. There you can read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. Now you probably already know that you can access keyboard shortcuts for any menu bar command that there is. You can see them right in the menu bar. You can also go into System Preferences and create your own keyboard shortcuts. But there's another very hidden set of keyboard shortcuts that you can use called key bindings. There are a bunch of default key bindings that aren't that useful, but you can create your own custom key bindings and those can be really powerful. Key bindings are mostly useful when you're typing. They're not things that you use to access functionality in apps. They're more for when you're typing in apps like TextEdit, Pages, the Mail app, a form in Safari. Just about anything that you type in, you could use key bindings as shortcuts. So the built-in ones aren't really that useful, but I'm going to start by just showing you those. So for instance, here I am in TextEdit and I can use Control F to go forward and Control B to go backwards. That's Control, not Command. Now these aren't that useful because the arrow keys will do these for you. There are some other ones like Control A to go to the beginning of a paragraph, Control E to go to the end, Control N will go down a line, Control P will go up. You can delete characters with Control D or in the other direction Control H. Control O will insert a line. If you have something selected, Control L will jump to that selection and highlight it. That's not that useful here, but if you had a long document and your selection was somewhere that you scrolled away from, Control L will get you back there quick. Some other ones are Control K to delete to the end of the line and the very weird one Control T to swap two characters. There are a few others but you get the idea. For the most part they're not super useful, which is probably why you haven't heard of them before. But you can create your own key bindings and those can be extremely powerful. So the way to create your own is you have to create a special file. So to do that I need to first create a special folder in the library folder. So in the Finder here I'm going to create a new Finder window, then use Go, hold the Option key down and go to Library. Then I'm going to look for the folder called Key Bindings. Chances are you don't see it because it's not there. You need to create it yourself. So you're going to go and create a new folder and you need to call this folder exactly Key Bindings, like that. Then in this folder we need to create a text file. I'm going to go back to TextEdit, create a new document, make sure that document is set to plain text. So now it's a plain text document. I'm going to save it, and to save it into the folder the easy way to do it is to drag and drop the folder into the Save dialog. That jumps right there. So make sure you're saving it to Library Key Bindings. And then you need to name this exactly Default Key Binding. And then the extension should be DICT. Exactly like that. Make sure you uncheck the use.txt there because you don't want it to be .dict.txt. So I'm going to save this and now I've got this file here. I can look in Key Bindings, check to make sure it's there. I'm going to actually use Command I on it to make sure that the actual name of this file is keybinding.dict. No .txt afterwards. And then I haven't added any extra spaces. It's exactly like this. This is tricky because the folder name is Key Bindings with a lowercase b and this file is Default Key Binding with a capital B and no S. So you got to make sure you get everything right. Now I'll close this and I've got the file open here and I can create a key binding. I'm going to start with a curly bracket. I'm going to go to a new line and then a tab. That's all cosmetic there to make it look nice and neat. But now in quotes I want to put the key binding, which is going to be Control and then uppercase U. I'm going to use Shift 6 to have a caret that represents the Control key and then Shift U for uppercase U. So this is actually Control Shift U. If I did a lowercase u there it would just be Control U. Then I'm going to do equals and then in parentheses the command that I'm going to issue, which in this case is uppercase word. And we'll learn about more commands in a minute. I need to put a colon after the command. That's just how it's done. Close a parentheses and put a semicolon there. And then on the new line close with a curly bracket. It's got to be exactly this. You can't forget the quotes. You can't forget to have both ends of the parentheses or the colon or the semicolon. If anything is different, if you spelled this differently or put a space there or something, it's not going to work. So you have to be precise. Now I'm going to save this. Now when you save a new key binding, the apps running don't know anything about it until you quit them and relaunch. That's very important. I know I'm going to get questions of people saying it's not working for me, and the problem comes down to that they haven't simply relaunched the apps that they're using. So in this case I want to test in TextEdit. So I want to quit TextEdit and relaunch it. Now this key binding should make it so that if I have my cursor in a word and I use Control Shift and U, it makes it uppercase. I'm going to undo there and you can see that it even works if I select several words. If I have a selection like that and do it, it's going to make it uppercase for all of that. So there's something handy. It's not particularly special because I could always have gone to Edit and then Transformations and then make uppercase. And it does the same thing. It's actually using the same function in the background to do those things. But now I just have a quick keyboard shortcut to do it. I could add more here really easily. Just go to a new line and let's do Control but also Option, which is Shift and then a tilde. That's the key above the Tab key on US keyboards. U. So no shift needed because that's a lowercase u. And then lowercase word like that. Save. I got to quit TextEdit, relaunch it again, and now I can put my cursor in a word there, do Control Shift U and Control Option U. And you've got the Control key, the Option key. You can also use the @ symbol for Command. And some documentation for this shows the $ for Shift. But I find that doesn't work. You simply have to use the uppercase letter for Shift. Now of course these may not be that useful since there are already ways to do these in the menu and then you could say keyboard shortcuts for those. But the parentheses here are masking a really important thing. You can have several commands attached to one key. So here is another one. In this case I'm going to use Control and the number 1 on the keyboard. And I'm going to issue a bunch of commands here separated by commas. So the first one is move to beginning of paragraph and then move word right and do that again. So move 2 words forward. And then a regular move right which will move forward 1 character. Then move right and modify selection. So that's going to select 1 character to the right. Do that 3 times. So what this will do is it'll go to the beginning of the line, move forward 2 words plus 1 space, and then select the next 3 characters. Let's save and then quit, relaunch TextEdit, and give it a try. I'm going to put the cursor way over here and I'm going to use Control 1 and you can see it did exactly that. It gave me the first 3 characters of the 3rd word. Now whether you need to do that specifically or some other modification of this. You can use beginning or end. You can move right or left by word or just 1 character at a time. You can move right or left and modify selection to select things. So if there's some specific task that you need to perform on a bunch of text data, you can create shortcuts like this to make it easy. Instead of having to do all of these different things or fumble around with the cursor to select things, you can set up a series of commands like this and assign it to a single keyboard shortcut. Here's another one. Here I've set Control Shift T to select a paragraph, so the entire paragraph that's there, and use capitalized words. So it's going to make it title case. Every word will have a capital letter at the beginning. But notice at the beginning I have it set mark and then swap with mark. What this does is it remembers the selection and then here it restores a selection. So let's save this, quit, relaunch TextEdit. And let's say I put the cursor right here in the middle of the word fox and I use Control Shift T. You can see it did all those things. It remembered where the cursor was. Then it selected the entire paragraph, made it all start with capital letters, and then restored the selection right to that point. You could even keep it simple with 2 commands just like this. So in this case Option 1 is going to just set the mark. And Option 2 is going to restore the mark. And for good measure it's going to center selection in visible area. Remember that Control L I showed you at the beginning? That's what that does. So let's save this, quit, run again, and let's add a bunch of extra lines here. So there's a bunch of extra lines. I could go select this word, do Option 1. I can go here later in the document and do Option 2 and it will reselect that word and jump to it. Here's another one. Control and then the left parenthesis, which is Shift 9 on US keyboards. That's going to, remember the selection, move backward one character. So it'll go to the beginning of the selection. Then it's going to insert some text. And what text is it going to insert? Well, that's in the next command. Notice this command here is insert text. This next command is the text to insert. So a left parenthesis. Then it's going to restore the selection again. Then move forward, so to the end of the selection. Move forward one extra one. Why? Because the selection we remembered didn't have this character we inserted. So it's got to get to the end with one more character. Then it's going to insert text, a right parenthesis. Let's save, quit, and bring it back. And now I can select some text and then use Control Shift 9, and the result is it surrounds it in parentheses using this series of commands. But wait a minute, you say. This insert text is really interesting. Can we use that just by itself? Sure. So let's go and just have Control 2 just be an insert text and have a bunch of text insert. Save that, quit, relaunch, and go to a new line here, and Control 2 inserts that text. This is kind of like a text replacement, but you don't actually have to type the text to replace. Instead of having to type a word and hit space or return or something and then have the text replaced, just one keyboard shortcut inserts this text. So it's a quicker way to insert text than text replacements. Which would be great, except that how many keys are there on the keyboard? I mean, you can use Control 1, Control 2, all the way to Control 0, maybe a few other things. Eventually you're going to run into conflicts with other keyboard shortcuts and you're going to have to remember all that stuff. Well, the cool thing about key bindings is that you can nest them. Let me insert this here. You can see I'm going to use Control and lowercase t, so just Control T equals, and then put another curly bracket. And then have a set of key bindings that actually have to happen after this. So in order for these to work, these little insert text commands, you have to do Control T followed by another key. So I've got 3 different ones here. Let's save this, quit, relaunch, and now on a new line I can do Control T and then A. Control T B. Control T C. That really expands the amount of these things that you can have. I'm going to show you one more one. In addition to all those modifier keys, you can use pound or the hash symbol, and that indicates the numeric keypad. If you have a numeric keypad on an extended keyboard like I do, you can actually use that and have a single key press do one of these. So for instance, I could have it do an insert text like that. All I'm going to do is hit the 1 on my numeric keypad. So let's try that one out. And just pressing 1 on the numeric keypad does what I need. So I could have 9+ of those just using my numeric keypad for these little text insertions or any of these shortcut commands. Now to show you that this doesn't just work in TextEdit, let's try it in some different apps. For instance, here we are in Pages. Let me use that Control 2 and you can see it inserts there in Pages. I can select this and use Control Shift U and you could see that it does the uppercase. So Pages works great. The Mail apps, somewhere you're probably going to want to use this as well. So Control 2, you can see that works. I can select all of it. Control Shift U, that works. In the Messages app I can use it. Control 2 inserts that there. An easy way to paste in quick messages that you use often. It even works in Numbers. You would expect it to work while you're typing inside of a cell like that, but I was surprised to find all you need to do is select a cell and then you could actually use it like that and it knows to insert that as text. Even in Safari inside of a text box there. So here we go. Like that. I can select it all. Control Shift U. These all work in there. And remember, you have to relaunch apps after you change key bindings for this to work. It's very easy to forget that. You could test it out in TextEdit, find it works great, and then try it in Safari and find it doesn't work at all. But that's because you had Safari running the whole time. You need to quit Safari, relaunch it, and then Safari knows about your changes. So there are a lot of pitfalls here. You got to make sure you create the right file with exactly the right file name, put it in the right spot with the right folder name. You got to make sure that you think like a programmer here and make sure you have everything perfect. Make sure you don't forget any quotes, any parentheses, the colons, the commas, the semicolon at the end. Anything that you miss is going to make it so things don't work. So you got to be really careful with it. And then you also have to worry about conflicts. If you're using a keyboard shortcut that already exists in that app, it's not going to work. You want to make sure you use a keyboard shortcut that doesn't do anything else. So if something isn't working, try another keyboard shortcut because that app may have a conflict. And remember, apps have different keyboard shortcuts. So something that works in TextEdit may not work in Pages because Pages already has something assigned to that keyboard shortcut. And it may or may not work in some apps. For instance, when I tried this in Microsoft Word, I was able to get some text insertions working, like ones from the numeric keypad, but other ones either conflicted with existing keyboard shortcuts or Word was blocking them somehow. So if you're using Microsoft Word, you've got to kind of use their own tools for things. You can't use key bindings. And Terminal also has its own thing going on. If you try to use these in Terminal, they won't necessarily work. But for just about everything else, it seemed to work just fine. Now you're probably also interested in the commands. How did I know that uppercase Word worked and move word right worked and insert text and all of those? Where do those come from? Is there a list? There's really not a great list anywhere. Some Apple documentation for developer stuff has some of these in there, but not all of them work in key bindings. Here's a bunch of different places you can go to get a better sense of what's available. I'm going to have all of these links in the post for this at macmost.com. So for instance, here somebody posted some useful information that includes the modifiers, although note that I find the $shift doesn't work. Here are some key codes for things like arrow keys and the home key and things like that. So you can use those in key bindings and some examples of how to use those. Here's someone that actually created a default keybinding.dict file that has a lot of useful things in it, and you can use this to search through it and get ideas for other commands that are available, like that one or this one or cut and copy, all of those. So looking through other people's key bindings that they've posted can help you find commands. There's also a series of pages here that is pretty old but seems that most stuff still works, going into some details about these key bindings. There's a handy list here of a lot of the different commands and another handy list here that shows you how existing keys are already using these key bindings. So you could actually use something that's already in use, like move left to the left arrow, and that's how you could add that command to your own key binding. So look through these pages if you're really interested in digging deep and creating your own key bindings that do powerful things. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.